Welcome to an episode of Full Tilt Esports Psych. This is episode 1, the first official episode. We're out here, man. We're doing it big. Mikey, I have a question for you. Are you tilted?
Dude, I'm always tilted. Are you tilted?
I'm crazy tilted. I'm insanely tilted. Actually, I'm really tilted because I literally just spilled some tea on my keyboard,
Yeah, I hate to see it
and
happen.
just maybe 30 minutes before this, and I don't know whether my keyboard is working anymore. So I've switched to my old keyboard that's like 10 years old, but still works just fine. We'll do some old school gaming instead of mechanical keyboard stuff. But whatever, man. I'm tilted.
It's
Welcome to
okay. That's
Full
why
Tilt
we're
Esports.
full tilt esports psychology.
We're full tilt esports psychology. We're fully tilted all the time.
Dude. So, to everyone, happy holidays and happy New Year's.
Likewise.
Uh, just a quick update on our New Year's. I kind of had a damper put on by my New Year's plans by COVID,
What happened?
but luckily I actually didn't test
Oh,
positive.
okay.
Yeah. Still got to spend time with family, gamed with some friends who got stopped by COVID also. Uh, but yeah, how about you, dude? What'd you do for New Year's?
Just trying to dodge the pandemic. So that's kind of hard, right? If it's an effing pandemic, so you can't really be. The only way to dodge a pandemic would not to be not on this planet. So I am on this planet, so having a hard time. But I'm doing fine, doing good. So I went and traveled over the holidays. So first of all, happy holidays, happy New Year, welcome to 2022. Um, Hopefully it'll be better this year. That's what we said last year. That's what we said the year before. But we're still waiting for the grass on the other side.
Yeah.
Um,
What were you talking about? I think each year did get better,
oh
right?
yeah, no, yeah. Well, I mean, like it kind of has. It kind of has. There's pros and cons. We live with it. We live and we learn, and we
Yeah.
continue to improve. I went traveling with my family over the break, so it was really nice. Actually, I went to Arizona. I flew into Arizona. I went to Sedona, where the famous the Red Rocks are and everything.
Okay.
Did some hiking. It was really cold at the time. It actually snowed while I was there, which
Hey, but
is
cold weather isn't that bad as long as you're prepared.
no,
That's
that's
one thing
true.
Korea taught me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then I flew to San Jose in California. We drove down to the Monterey area. The Monterey Bay. I did like the Big Sur sort of drive along the highway along the cliff. It was really impressive. It was awesome. Did some hiking there too. A lot of natural stuff. Saw like the redwood trees and things and all like the different biodiversity there. I'm a biologist, so like I'm a fucking nerd about that shit.
Yeah.
And like you got like the coastal sea life, sea otters and sea lions, whale migrations. It was really cool. It was really badass. And then after that, we went to the Napa Valley area, right? Just a couple hours north of there.
You got
And
some
then
nice wines?
yeah, wine and dine, right? Like, and
Yeah,
there's like
yeah.
Michelin star restaurants involved and stuff like that. So it was a great time. It was really relaxing, really fun to get out of Texas, go to Cali for a little while, go to Arizona for a little while. So that was really cool. But yeah, back at it again, right? So
Yeah, definitely trying to release along with everyone's New Year's resolutions. We're trying to release our first episode, so
that's part of our
hope this goes
resolutions.
well.
It's part of our
And
resolution.
as we mentioned in episode 0, our intro, we did find people to work on our graphic design issues or a lack of. So
Entirely
shout out
lacking
to
thereof.
Johnny Thick and Bakaku for the graphic design idea and the work that will be incoming, I guess. And I hope everyone looks forward to our future logo and intro slash outro.
Much like what I just did to my keyboard with the water. I may something similar may be involved. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah, something like that. So anyway, so I guess let's just move right into what we're gonna talk about. What are we gonna talk about today, Mike?
Yeah. So I wanted to introduce like an idea about getting a better environment or culture
Okay.
for I guess teams to discuss things. And the example I'm going to use is from the Seattle Seahawks, NFL football team. They have something called Tell the Truth Mondays. And so basically, all players, coaches, staff, or whoever are all, well, maybe not staff, but they're all in the same room, and they are allowed to give and like express whatever thought, like an open discussion about whatever is troubling them, what they think is a problem, what they think they did well, et cetera, right? And I think that also with the people receiving whichever criticism to be able to listen first and take it in without backlashing.
Gotcha.
Like, oh, you can talk, but just not in an aggressive way where it's I don't know the right word to do.
Mhm.
Help me out here. It's like in a negative way, like
Yeah,
trying to
like
defend
without
themselves.
feeling. Yeah, right. I can see what that would be like. So like maybe something like not being like having like an open floor or like an open locker room in order to like be able to say speak your mind essentially, right?
Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting thing that a lot of the time we don't get that opportunity.
yeah,
Sometimes either either in a professional setting like at work, and for I guess for Seattle Seahawks that would be their work, right? Like in a
yeah.
workplace, in like a conference or like in like a meeting or something,
Right.
or in school, like maybe like you get called on or something like that, right? Like being
Hmm.
able or like in a locker room or like in a competitive environment, right? Just
Right.
being in a team huddle, something like that, like being able to say stuff without feeling like you're criticizing someone too hard or being criticized too hard or being called out,
Yeah.
kind of, right?
Like taking it
Basically,
as is,
yeah, like
and
basically not being put on blast, I guess. And like
right.
like this is a way to put somebody on blast, but in like a way that it's not like you're being blasted, right? So like you're this is like it seems to make sense to me. And sort of like so me and Mike were talking about this and we're sort of coming up with like ways of like how to describe this or whatever, like having a tough time, but John, our local philosopher slash fortune cookie. He liked to call it tough love, hug it out, right? And I kind of like that actually. So like it's like sometimes you got to hear something, right? Like you might be on your shit or whatever, right? Like you might not be, you need to be pulled back or reeled back by the people that care about you the most, right? And that is like really is just like tough love. It's kind of, and we're not talking about like some kind of like it's serious like intervention level shit, right? But like just like being like, hey, like we need you to do this instead of doing what you're doing right now, or like we want you to continue doing this thing. Even sometimes it could even be just like positive stuff, and then like hugging it out afterwards, making sure that like whatever ended up being said wasn't like like too harsh or too overly critical. Having open discussions, and then honest open discussions, and then caring about these people enough that like it's like, hey, let's be better together, right? Like the goal is to like advance your group as a team, right? Like it's not like you're doing it alone in a lot of these cases, and even if you are, you're probably having these like conversations literally in the mirror with yourself too, right? Like sometimes you got to be harsh and critical, and then hug it out for yourself. Otherwise, it's just only
Self
harshness for
care.
yourself too. Yeah. So even we're talking about like competitive stuff, like even stuff like single player stuff, or like even like boxing or tennis. Sometimes it's like singles, right? Like you might not have a team, but these are the same conversations you're having, even like in a mirror to yourself, right?
You're a team with yourself in a sense. As
Yeah, you
weird as it
are.
sounds
Yeah, you're
like,
one man team.
y'all should look it up if you have time, or we'll probably talk about it sooner or later. Self care and like inner child work.
Yeah,
If you were to treat yourselves like yourself as your own child, it's an interesting topic.
yeah,
We'll get to it eventually.
yeah. Making sure you're healthy mentally in a
Yeah.
good state, right? So
And then
yeah. So
yeah.
what else can you tell us about this?
But for that environment we just talked about,
Hmm.
our tough love, hug it out. You really need good leaders.
Hmm. Yeah.
That good culture that is, to be honest, pretty important to the culture of winning. Because
True.
like as you see, like at least in the NBA, like the Miami Heat,
Heat
I mean
culture,
football, Seattle Seahawks when they were winning for a while, like
Seahawks
they
culture.
had that culture where they can talk together,
Yeah,
right?
that's fair.
Yeah, and the emotions of the coaches really make a big, I guess, impact on their players.
Yeah, I guess that's what they do say, right? Like it's like a common phrase is like it starts from the top or whatever, right? And I guess
Yeah,
that would kind of be like what we'd be talking about in that case, right?
Yeah, like following the emotion of the coaches because they're like you said, they're at the top, the leadership positions.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to stay calm even when people are not calm talking to you, I
Yeah,
think is a pretty tough from personal experience, I think is pretty hard sometimes. Maybe it's just
yeah.
because of me, but I do get
Certainly
pulled
requires
around.
patience and things like that, right? Like it's not like primary nature for some people, and sometimes you kind of have to like coax it out, like um, being able to do that, right? Like, so it's really interesting. So the ability to be calm and give constructive criticism is like a really big topic that we wanted to talk about today. Um, like in all these situations that we're talking about, especially in competitive environments, uh, it's kind of high stress, right? Like that's just how it is. Competition in its very nature is like you're stressing yourself, your team, whatever, a group, and challenging. It's like the whole point of competition is challenge, right? So obviously, yeah, like being able to stay calm, having that composure, and being able to like provide constructive criticism or whatever on the fly is incredibly difficult, right? And so, and like so a lot of time when we're in those situations, we end up having like a lot of like fight or flight sort of responses.
Yeah.
Just having a situation where maybe like you feel like you are being challenged, right? And that comes out in a negative way, right? Like if you're being criticized, you might end up trying to like either run away from whatever that criticism may be, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, or maybe like your reaction is to like fight it or lash out or whatever the case may be, right? And like so sort of, and Mike told me I said this, and I don't even remember saying this, but criticism isn't deadly, right? It's not something that's lethal. Like that whole fight or flight reaction is like, a remainder of our primal responses, right? But at the same time, it's crucial for us to realize that like just because you're being criticized at any given moment doesn't mean that like you're not in danger at all, right? It's something I think we should like view as a way to as a potential possibility to improve ourselves, especially during
Yeah,
competition, right? So
for sure.
on the other hand, though, we do need to be careful because, and this is why this is like such a important topic for us to discuss because it is a fine line. Because when we do our criticism, it's all fine and good, right? Like, but like there is there is a certain danger like where you come into like over like there's constructive criticism and then there's just like negative criticism and like taking somebody down, and then like even worse possibly even like bullying at a certain point. But we don't have to really talk about this one too much. But like what could lead to this could potentially lead to like a negative aspect of things and like maybe like border even on like abuse or bullying, right? So we need to be really really careful when we provide our criticism that these kind of situations don't occur or
Yeah.
prop up. So
There's
anyway,
a
yeah,
thing with this. I was thinking, like,
yeah,
if some people, like, if we go back to what we said about we needed good leaders and good culture to have this constructive criticism, it kind of brings in the accountability part, right?
yeah,
Because, like, some people also scapegoat too and play victim, but
yeah,
that's why you need those good leaders
yeah,
to
absolutely.
manage that. Just a little quick, going off tangent. But
Well,
yeah.
that could certainly happen. That's for sure. We may actually address that further down the line, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe sooner or later. But all right. So I want to ask everyone here to please think about a time where you felt either criticized or you criticized somebody. And just kind of think about the feelings that were involved, like the chain of events, etc. If you can think about that real quick for like a good couple seconds. Oh, if you haven't thought of anything yet, I can tell you one of my own experiences. I have been definitely been on both sides of being criticized and being the one who criticizes, and how both can scar us without us being aware of it. I actually have a famous person who kind of did something similar or had a similar experience. Terry Crews, you know, that funny swole actor. Go look him up if you don't know him.
Old Spice
Great dude.
commercials,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Uh, his example was how his abusive father toward his mother and him kind of led to like a pretty rough environment growing up, right? And sometimes when you aren't in an environment to like learn the quote unquote right ways or like a better way, the only thing he saw growing up was that abusive environment, right? So these traumas and that environment influence how he treated his own children when he got older. He apologized and he's working on this part, but he did yell at his own daughter like she was a 30-year-old man. And he had to catch himself and is always trying to work on that part. But you know, it is hard and I'm proud of him for working on that.
Mm.
And that's what I think we should all strive to be, in a sense, at least in this aspect, is trying to work on the parts or our traumas, right? Each
Yeah,
generation also becoming better than the last.
yeah, yeah,
So I guess when we think about that or reflect on this, whether it be a competitive situation, a daily life situation, I guess, or any type like work environment, family environment, whatever. Just like try to be mindful, right, of what we can work on, I guess.
yeah. That makes sense. And it's not like we have to be perfect either, too, right? Like, I mean, we're all human beings, right? And like,
Yeah, for
we
sure.
get pushed to our limits. We're stressed all the time, right? Like, I know everybody's stressed all the time. So whenever, like, you like go to like a bending or even a breaking point, you sort of like realize that, and you might snap, right? Like, I guess like in that example that we're talking about, but then also being like, like pulling it back and saying like, hey, like, wait a second, like, why did I do this, right? And I think generally speaking, as long as we're like mature human beings, like we can accept that an apology from somebody that realized that they did something like that, or like if you're being overly critical, or like whatever the case may be, like you like stand up and say like, wait a second, like I shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry, right? Like but like I would, as long as that like it genuinely comes out of like a place of respect, right? Like that's really how it has to come out from. So
The intent needs to be
yeah,
there
exactly. That,
too.
like there has to be like a certain level of intent and genuine affection there. So another, I guess, scenario, I guess it reminds me of it is like in sports. I guess we're talking about competition, right? In sports, we watch NBA a lot, so we like I guess like most recently we would be talking a lot about like say like Russell Westbrook, right? He's a polarizing figure.
Yeah,
An
definitely.
outstanding point guard, right? Like Hall of Fame level, like he's an literal MVP, right? And like as an individual at least, right? Like, and but who knows? Like sometimes the results don't necessarily speak to that. So what we really want to talk about in that case with Russell Westbrook is, and this is not just him, but like he's like a really prime example of this, is where like there's a certain level of like accountability that needs to be produced within a team environment, right? And when like somebody is like above it all, or like if somebody really is that like exceptional, sometimes they feel like they're also accepted from those accountability problems and criticism from other people, right? So it's kind of like who are you to say anything to me sort of situation, where you end up in a case where like for example, and this isn't the maybe always the case, but like maybe like say Russ might play a certain way and then he's hard headed about it, he's stubborn, but then he won't change like something that could potentially be positive for him, right? Or listen to, or like when you're like so in your own zone, when you're like being super competitive, sometimes it's hard to like let that in, right? And to allow yourself to be coached for people that like that care about you, or teammates or whoever, to be able to tell you something and like for you to let that in, right? So that is like the both sides of it, right? Where like on one side Mike was saying like somebody like Terry Crews or whoever was like being overly critical, and then they had to pull back. On the other side of it, you have to be receptive to this criticism, right? And
Yeah.
if you're too hard headed, you're too stubborn. If you won't let it in, then there is sort of possibly a ceiling that you can reach, no matter how good you are
Yeah.
as a person,
It's
how
true.
good you are as a player, how good you are individually, right? There could be a limit to what you could reach, right? Like because maybe you're just not listening to what other people are telling you, like, and that could be a thing too. So there's like there's the people like we were saying that are receiving giving criticism or like advice, even like, right, criticism could be given as advice or taken as criticism or advice, right? So there's two
Yeah.
sides to that.
We also have an example that you could talk more about of someone who did take the advice and worked on things and had the support and like a good advice. Like this is what we could strive to be.
Yeah.
Can you introduce him?
Yeah. So like again, in the basketball vein, like, well, we were kind of thinking about like who else could maybe embody something else, like the other way around. We're thinking somebody like Lonzo Ball, even, right? Like, so this is a guy that got drafted really pretty recently, right? He had a lot of limitations to his game. Like, there's like a lot of room to improve. But the thing is, like, he took those exact criticisms that were leveraged against him, and he said, let's try to make those strengths, right? And then this is like, again, there's like plenty of players out there that end up doing this. And this could be in like video games too, where like somebody is like not making the right choices or they're not doing the right things, right? And then they take that criticism and they say, wait a second, like, I probably should have done this differently, or how can I like put in the work to improve, right? And then they do that, right? So then one of the reasons I wanted to bring up Lonzo was because, hey, like, he had like a totally kind of broken, I don't want to say broken, but really strange jump shot for him, right? And then he
Yeah.
improved it, and he's like one of the best 3-point shooters right now in the league right now. I'm pretty sure, like, percentage wise.
And, like
Yeah,
just real quick, that wasn't in a span of like a couple. It took like 3 to 4 years.
yeah.
So
It
like,
takes time, right? Like, and especially like when you're changing something that could be considered core to you, like literally part of your core, like who you are as a person. So like, it can be to the sort of point where if you have the right support system, if you have the right mentality, if you have the right mindset,
yeah,
if you have the right people to tell you maybe, hey, like, you should try this instead, or like if you are receptive enough to do so, you can change a lot of who you are. Maybe not like literally who you are, but like quite a lot of it, right? Like you can change part of
big
your nature
factor.
even. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
huge factor in that. So like we talk about criticism and like what could go wrong with it, but also what could go right? Like what could potentially result from something so good, right?
Yeah. So now that we've given y'all some famous people examples, etc., right? I'm gonna dial it back and make sure like everyone, including us, knows the concept that we're trying to approach, which is um, many people try to avoid situations altogether, right? We mentioned how some people can repress certain
Flight, right?
yeah, fight basically, and they only talk about the good things in hopes of keeping the good vibes, which at times can be good, right? But this is avoidance coping, and this is normal as humans, but it doesn't hurt for us to work on it, right? And I think a dude has some stuff about ego defense and rationalization that kind of falls under the avoidance coping.
So, sort of what we were talking about in terms of avoidance coping, kind of what that really means for, and we wanted to, of course, bring the psych part of our esports psych into this. Avoidance coping involves cognitive and behavioral efforts oriented towards denying, minimizing, or otherwise avoiding directly dealing with stressful demands, right? And this makes a lot of sense. And like, let's be freaking real. Like, I do this shit all the time, right? I'm sure everybody does, right?
Yeah,
Where they,
me too.
where they take something and then they say like, hey, like, oh, I don't like, in this specific example, we're talking about criticism. they look at criticism and they say, oh, okay, like let's take it, like let's have these problems that are presented to us by somebody else, and then let's like either deny them or minimize those efforts or like just not deal with it, right? Like that's kind of like the way that we're talking about for avoidance coping, right?
Right.
And then also what we wanted to talk about a little bit here, and it's related, is like rationalization, right? And part of like what rationalization does is it's part of like ego defense, right? So like having a situation where it's like, how do we rationalize things that might have gone wrong and like why they went wrong and what our own brains try to do to like to make sure our self-preservation is intact, right? And so like one example that was given in our research might be like, oh, like a student that like got rejected from their dream school might be like, oh, well, that's okay, I'm going to a school that's less competitive or more welcoming. Or another example might be like, oh, like a guy like gets divorced or something, and then their ex-wife is he's like convinced that, oh, like maybe it's a blessing in disguise, maybe I can travel more, or like she wasn't good enough for me anyway, right? Like these are like rationalizations and like ego defenses, right? Like these are things that can occur, especially in competition or when we're faced with criticism too, right? We're basically doing our best to avoid getting hurt, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the situation that we were like coming up with. What could happen when we're being criticized, right? Like we like avoid it all, and that happens a lot in competition because, and I thought this was pretty something that I was considering when I was talking about this, was like because in competition by definition, losing is an inevitable part of it, right? So there will be times when you weren't good enough. Like that's the end statement of it, right? Is basically if you lost, something went wrong and you weren't good enough in this competition for some reason. So for us, it hurts, right? Because it's like, well, like, we ourselves are thinking like, why were we working so hard? We feel like we like to think we're so good ourselves, right? And then we might have to like rationalize that to like protect ourselves and be like, oh man, like that wasn't the best I could have done, but like this was because of this reason or that reason, or blowing anything off that like could have been like a reason for your quote unquote failure. I don't want to call it harsh like that harshly, but failure. Like what could have like led to this failure, and then just trying to preserve a positive viewpoint of yourself at the same time. So like you might hear this as like, oh, I didn't want to win anyway, or like I didn't make a mistake, or like so this can come out as blaming teammates too, even, right? Like that's one of the big ones that a lot of us do in gaming, especially, right?
Yeah.
So like this is like a very common like psychological occurrence, right? Like that we can see in competitive gaming and what we wanted to discuss today.
Yeah. Also, another part of that, on the other side, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is people are overly critical during game situations at
Yeah.
times, right?
Yep.
And I'm definitely guilty of this at times, but I have been working on it. So yeah, but
Mike could be pretty
basically,
mean. Mike could be pretty mean. He could be
yeah.
he could be
Well,
blunt. How about that? He's a pretty blunt guy.
I can be blunt, but also during those times, you have to. It's not the time to be critical, I guess. The time the time to be like go over those situations and how to be give constructive criticism is usually either after the game in a review or
Mm.
something. And in game, just try to keep the momentum you have
Yeah,
going. I feel
yeah.
like.
It can be pretty difficult because, like, as we said before, like competition by its very nature is like a challenge, right? And
Yeah.
during that time, it's like it's a high stress situation, right? Like, there's a lot going on. You can't really have like necessarily have like full on like conversations and like be worried about everybody's feelings at the same time, or it's very difficult to do that, right? Like, so that's why
Yeah.
it's a possible skill or like talent to be able to do that, right?
And like I mentioned about different traumas, I guess I played high school football at a competitive level earlier on. Like I did make varsity my sophomore year, and like when you have a problem, at least the team maybe it wasn't a good environment, but my teammates and the coaches at the time who got raised in whichever environments they grew up in, things just fly. And it's because you got roughly an hour of a football game to figure out how to win,
Yeah.
and if they adjusted, how do you adjust?
Right. And
How do
like
we adjust? More
exactly.
so,
And I think
right?
that ends up being a lot of the time where the criticism ends up coming in is when something's not going right and then they made an adjustment and then your team, whoever needs to make their own adjustment to counter that change, right? So and that could occur quite often, right? So being
And
able to do that quickly.
like even outside to bring it back to gaming and ranked games situations, right? Whether it be like a CS:GO, League of Legends, etc. Like if you've competitively gamed, you've witnessed people trying to fix things quickly, right?
Yeah.
But those messages can most of the time, if it's quick, it can come across as rude and uncaring. Basically, we came up with our own term for this: toxic reinforcement,
Yeah.
right?
But
And yeah, it's. I mean, you are trying to fix a problem quickly, but more often than not, it's counterintuitive to that momentum that you had, and I guess you're just like kind of dumbing down the good vibes for your team. And there's different ways to approach this. Do you want to give us some of those?
yeah, so we were kind of discussing a little bit about this already, but I think Corda being able to change sort of the way that you do things and behave would be accountability, right? So like a feeling of accountability with yourself and with your team, which stems from respect, obviously, but like also like something from yourself, right? Like where it's like, do you genuinely have a desire to change, right? Like so, if we're in a competitive environment, if we're playing competitive video games, whether you feel like this is true or not, like you need to have like a better open mindset in order to like genuinely accept like maybe I'm not the best thing on earth and I could do something better or differently, right? And like having like an open mind in that sense, but like having like a genuine desire to change, right? And then accepting that sometimes there are certain shortcomings, and when you're giving criticism too, accepting that some people have certain shortcomings while they also have different strengths, while understanding like how far those limitations go, right? Like because like once you get to a certain point, it's kind of like, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? Or like some people are maybe not as capable of doing those things. Like I don't know, if you have like a 3-year-old on the soccer field or something, and you want him to like kick a goal, like maybe it's pretty difficult because they can hardly do any running in the first place, right? So like
What are you talking
understanding.
about? They can run everywhere, bro.
It's true. Maybe I should have gone down to maybe 2-year-old or 1-year-old. How about that? Like they have a little bit of a difficult time like doing anything so all right, long story short, like there are certain limitations when it comes to certain people, and they might have certain shortcomings, and then like having like being able to like adjust your criticisms to be like in line with that expectation, right? And yeah, and so and then accountability when you're part of a team, right? Making sure that you're taking the personal responsibility for whatever is going on, like that could be occurring, and like you're not blaming other people for that, right? Like blaming your teammates, which most often occurs in video games all the time, right? And so like because that happens when you like try to reach out across the aisle and say, hey, what if we try to do something differently? Sometimes this might be misinterpreted as a threat or like some kind of attack, a personal attack, right? So a lot of time it matters too, like who's providing that criticism, like who's the messenger, right? Like a lot of the time, if you're like playing a shooter game and you're like the person like or there's a person in your team that's like killing the most people, right? And then they're quote unquote carrying your team in kills, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, like I got mine, right? And then if you try to say something to this person, maybe they're not going to accept it, right? Because like, hey, who are you to tell me what to do? I'm getting all the kills or whatever, or I'm carrying the team. Like, like so like maybe they might have like an ego sort of situation where like you got to like reel it back in if you're that person, right? Where you have to reel it in and say like, hey, like even though maybe I feel like I'm the best thing out there, right? Like people that are maybe not as good as me still might have like positive things to tell me, right? And so like just being careful
It,
that the messenger, like
it,
even whoever it is, it can be whoever, and you can still accept that.
just to interject, dude.
Yeah,
I hate the I got mine
yeah,
argument,
I
bro.
do.
Like
I hate it a lot too.
it's so
You
dumb.
see it
I'm
all the time,
sorry
though.
to all of you that use it. Sure, like there is a part where it's true. Like someone else could put in work or some shit, but you also have to think of like all the small parts that are working, how you got maybe you did earn some of those frags like or sorry, in shooting games you got those kills or whatever legitimately by yourself without any help. But also there's like before you got to that point there might have been a lot of things that helped you out, whether someone was lit already as in like hurt, whether like someone threw a flash for you or whatever, or entry whatever, and you were lucky enough to be the trade killer, right? So just be appreciative of the people that you're playing with and don't try to tilt them off the face of the earth. I'm just saying.
I'm fully tilted all the time, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah. Like
yeah.
right now, we're both tilted, right?
Yeah, man. And so, like, just like being careful and then, like, not like uh, being toxic essentially and like having like a whole bunch of like blame deflection and shit like that. So, that's kind of what we were talking about. But yeah. So,
Mm. But there's another part. So I guess have you ever played with people, dude, that like players that are I feel like really smart, right? Like they can logic out a lot of different things.
smart people.
Yeah, but they are not coachable at all.
Yeah.
So like I guess if I bring it back to basketball, I can think of like maybe like a Kyrie Irving, but they're like geniuses, right?
True. Yeah. They're like savants, but like they're,
Yeah, but they don't. They do what they will do, right?
yeah.
Uh, Russell Westbrook might be, or less questionable, to
And
be honest.
that's kind of what is really interesting about this conversation in particular. The topic of this episode is because like we kind of want to take apart and like individually discuss these two things. Like oh like this is like there's like a certain amount of skill involved, but there's also a certain amount of like coachability involved, right? Like so people that are smart, people that are like really skillful, people that are exceptional, but like still aren't coachable, right? Like so that's kind of like where we come from when we're talking about like how do we accept criticism and things like that, because it's like it's a certain level of humility almost that like a lot of people have difficulty finding, right? So like that's kind of like what we're thinking about here.
Yeah, like sometimes those smart players, like I don't know, just using Valorant as an example. Sometimes I don't know, like someone's a lineup Larry, and that's fine because I do sometimes play lineup too. But like there's a nuance to that too, right? Like people understand how to play that eventually, and sometimes you can't always set up that situation. Sometimes it doesn't hurt, instead of using that for your lineups, maybe help your teammates, like support them in a different way, right?
Hmm.
And then you can still get a win. It's like changing it up, just like in life. Or personally, I don't want to eat the same food every day, right?
Yeah.
Personally, if I can, I like the switch up in food, right?
Yeah, the
It keeps
concept of giving people different looks, right? Like like keep a defense honest,
Yeah.
things like
And
that.
as far as foods, you appreciate your favorite food maybe more when you eat other foods too, right?
Hmm.
So try different things. Um, but yeah, so now we have our own solution to this problem that we introduced to y'all. And I guess my thoughts are something along the lines of constructive criticism, timing, open mindfulness, what's the team goal, and add some lighthearted humor to your approach to your teammate or the environment that you're talking with your coaches, your players, or if it's your daily life, your workers, your family, etc., your fellow coworkers, right? Because like no one wants it, as I've learned, no one wants to be put on blast blast or like
Mm-hmm.
what's the proper word to do?
Mm, on the spot, I don't know, like
Yeah.
just
Yeah, there you go. We'll use that on the spot. No one wants to be put on the spot in a completely negative way. Like if you could just at least like make it lighthearted humor, they appreciate a little bit. Also the time when I mentioned timing, it could be like, hey, maybe you pull them to the side instead of in front of everybody, right?
mm-hmm.
Or if it's in a video game, right? We mentioned do it after the game, like in the review part. And that's the
Yeah.
problem with a lot of teams that aren't like pro or something. They don't do this part. It's just like, we don't have so much time. Let's just go into the next game, right?
Yeah, that's
But
true.
those same problems are probably going to come up again, and because you don't do those review parts, and sometimes you might have friends or people you play with that don't want to do the review, and
Yeah.
that's also a hard part
So
to
like
deal with.
a degree of like of due diligence, right? And like looking
Yeah,
for self-improvement. Yeah.
yeah, and then so the team goal part I mentioned is you need to realize if the people you're playing with are on the same page as you. Do
Mm-hmm.
they want to play more competitively? Do they want to be more casual with it? Are they trying to learn the little things? Are they trying, like to win, etc.? And or do they have a different method of getting to the same point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can stand to learn from them too, and hopefully they learn from you also, right? Uh, and you know what? Everyone likes to laugh a little bit, so lighthearted humor will work. But
Yeah.
just
I think like a lot of what we're talking about today for in terms of constructive criticism has to do with tactfulness and like sort of like being able to like present something like in a like a very emotionally aware way, right? Like how are people going to take this, right? So yeah, that's true, right?
yeah, and also like you don't want to go. I said lighthearted humor, but you don't need to go like make it completely funny and whatnot. By completely funny, I mean like kind of taking away from your message. You still want the message to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to take anything away from that, right? And I kind of see it as something like we call this positive reinforcement,
Mm.
which is I'll give an example. It's like when you're training a dog. Um, I know we're all human, but we do also
Are we
learn
all
from
are
our
we all human?
experiences.
Are we all human? I'm not.
Well, if a dog, cat, or whatever is listening to our podcast, I'm okay with it. That's another listen, right?
Damn.
And uh, we give a treat to a dog when they do a target behavior or a behavior we like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we continue to do that on intervals. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But just basically always try to give the positive reinforcement to support those target behaviors that your team or your coworker, like, even just for a coworker, hang out with them or something, like they do something helpful to you.
Mm-hmm.
Words of appreciation help a lot, right?
Yeah.
Um, Also, like maybe in the future, like when they need help, or even before they might need something, you help them out, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Like it's pretty good. I think my boy Do has a good example for the human counterpart of us.
Yeah. So essentially, what we're trying to discuss here is that we have like um, we have reinforcement and punishment, right? Like that are like the two major methods of learning, right? Like a lot of like reinforcing of behavior and learning. So reinforcement includes like doing like causing something to increase behavior, and then we also have on the other side of things like punishment, right, where we end up decreasing a behavior, right? So, for example, like if we wanted to make like a good example of negative reinforcement, like so, our positive reinforcement would have been something like what Mike was saying, like our dog treats, right? And it would the dog doing a trick, and then you give them a treat, and they're going to do the trick again, right? And then the opposite side of things would be like an example for us would be like, oh, like negative reinforcement would be like taking an antacid before eating spicy food, right? This like helps you to avoid a bad situation from occurring, so it increases your behavior, which is to take that antacid. Or like same thing with like lactate. If you're gonna eat all that ice cream, kind of like I did in Arizona, I messed up. I definitely should have eaten some lactate before that, and I didn't, so I was punished. So next time I will have a negative reinforcement behavior where I will take lactate before that.
I need to get some lactate to be honest, because I just been avoiding ice cream and like a lot of things. But bro, ice cream is if I were to choose a dessert, I think that might be the favorite dessert. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's kind of tough not having it. So, yep.
And to go to the punishment side, which is where we're trying to decrease a behavior, right? So there's also a positive and negative side to punishment. So positive punishment is where we are adding a stimuli following whichever target behavior. And the example I'm going to use is for positive punishment. When I was playing CS:GO back in the day, a friend, I was okay. To be fair, I was very new to the game, and I never had played competitively in that game before, right? He every time I did something questionable after he's already told me, he might go towards me and shoot me a couple of times because there's friendly fire in that game. So it's like I'm getting small warned, right?
Oh no.
And eventually that same friend might actually kill me
Oh
if
no.
yeah,
Toxic.
or troll me in some way. He might smoke
Toxic.
me, he might flash me. It was bad. Yeah, I was traumatized. I still remember it very clearly. I'm traumatized by that.
Shout out to
But
Javi. You know, just
to
don't do dumb things and you won't get punished, Mike.
yeah. But to be fair, after a long time of all this, like I would say my decision making is pretty good.
So you
Like
decrease
it
bad
did work.
behaviors.
It did work, but I am
Ah.
traumatized by it.
Yeah, yeah. See, so I mean, you know, but you
Yeah,
came out better
yeah.
on top of it.
Yeah. But so the negative punishment though is to remove uh a stimulus following that target behavior. And in that same way, if we use the CS:GO reference I used, that same friend I mentioned, uh if we lost okay, I thought it was just if we lost he would stop playing, right? But maybe it was because we lost and I made way too many dumb decisions. So he did not have the patience to play again with me, right? And that could very well have been the case.
So
And
like he took away the privilege of playing with you and
yeah,
as punishment, right? So
yeah.
you decrease your bad
And
behaviors.
yeah, and he might not have even been doing that, but I mean, I could now when we've researched and looked at everything, maybe that was the case, you know,
Now, from
like
a psychological standpoint, do you feel punished?
uh maybe I'm not sure to be honest. I'll get back to everyone about that one.
Yeah, so Mike got punished and he decreased his bad behaviors. What's not to like about it? Psychology 101, isn't it?
I mean, yeah. But
But it didn't
all
necessarily
right,
for you.
so I have a different question
Okay.
following this, which is are leaders born or are they created?
Okay.
Yeah, I think both are reasonable, as in like they could both happen. Like
Hmm.
some are like naturally have some traits that could lead them to become better leaders, I guess.
Hmm.
But I've also seen some people change and become great leaders,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it, right? Leadership is something sometimes it's voluntarily taken, and then sometimes it's like kind of thrust upon you, right? Like it'll happen both ways. And I guess like what we're talking about here in terms of like accountability and like leadership, or like accountability and leadership is like in terms of like criticism, it's like it's really important when we're talking about it, right? Like because like how can you be a good leader in that sense?
Yeah.
To be able to change the way that we lead, right? Like,
Mhm.
are leaders born or are they created? I mean, I would agree with you. I think it could be both.
I'd probably
Um,
say.
Yeah.
this for another episode. Go
It
more
could
in
be.
depth on that.
Yeah, and so like I was looking this up a little bit, and I just like did like some cursory Googles. I didn't really like look into this too much, but I was kind of like, well, if we are defining leadership as something that can be like created, I guess, then I was like, how can you do that? Well, is there like leadership training out there? And the answer is like kind of like yes. Maybe not necessarily in the competitive like gaming or or in sports or anything as much, but maybe more along the lines of like a lot of time when was looking this business, right? Like management and like personality administration, and things like that, where like how can you become a leader and like be able to like dictate things to people where they are able to accept that, and that
You could
happens probably most
definitely
common in business, right? So
you get like as a sports person and like a gamer, like a lot of the business stuff I've learned you can definitely take away things
yeah,
from the leadership part and
yeah.
apply it to sports or esports, right?
Yeah, right. Because like at the end of the day, when you're talking about a team setting or like a competitive setting where you have a team, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because like it's just like team environment, right? Doesn't really matter the context of it, right? So it's like a management of personalities, a management of people. And so like some of the examples that I can think of just off the top of my head that I've learned over time were like things like when you are a leader in a team, or like say you're like an in-game leader. I think I picked this one up. I don't remember who it is exactly, but I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was like Sean Gares or whoever. When he was doing in-game leadership roles, he like gave a tip to people saying like, hey, like when you like call a strategy or whatever, like pre-round or something, when you're calling strategies, and this I guess this applies to anything, but when you're calling strategies, when you're doing things, you should be like picking individual people out and then like telling them exactly what to do. You can't just say like somebody go do this or somebody go do this. It's kind of like I want to assign the right person to that right role, even on the fly, like in order to like make sure that everything gets executed the way that you guys have planned, right? So that is one aspect of leadership that I thought was pretty interesting. Another thing that could come up too is like when, and this is something that I picked up too, and I've found good amount of success with this when you're trying to like soften a lot of stuff, when you're trying to soften criticism, or when you're trying to when you're in a like learning environment, or when you're like providing advice or something, using the we instead of saying I or you, but bringing it together and saying we. And I know that might be obvious to some people, but for some people it isn't. Where like when you are trying to point out criticism, things like this, instead of saying like you need to do this or you need to do this, like for example, when I'm like teaching, tutoring students, or like when I'm talking to patients or whatever, it'd be like, hey, like well, we need to decrease the amount of like carbs that we're taking in or something, right? Like to like maintain health or something, right? So like if you come at this and you say you need to cut out the ice cream in your diet, right? You need to use lactate before you eat ice cream, Mike. We can say like, and even though I'm not necessarily talking to me, I'm just gonna bring it up as we, like, hey, like I think we need to decrease the carbs in our diet, Mike. I think we need to decrease the ice cream. You're taking in too much sugar. So, and then maybe like bring it into the you after that point, right? Because like we are together in this, right? We are a
Yeah.
team, right? So like emotionally speaking, like emotional management wise, emotional EQ wise, right? Like you want to like be able to make sure that people are perceiving you the right way, right? Especially in authority positions, right? Especially in leadership positions.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just something that that I found to be like just part of like what you could do, especially when you're being when you're trying to be a leader, or you're trying to like convince people to do what you think we should be doing together, right?
Yeah. And I think you also mentioned something about like the schedules of reinforcement, like
Yeah,
whether it be intervals or like etc.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so well, what we wanted to talk about in terms of psychology too was like how we learn best, right? There are different methods, and we're not going to bore you with this, but there are different methods of reinforcement too, where we do like continuous reinforcement or only partial reinforcement, right? And actually, it's kind of interesting. Like if you give a reward in a continuous manner, it actually doesn't stick as well, and you learn a behavior quickly, but then you maybe don't necessarily continue that, or like it's harder to have that behavior well reinforced. Now, the best example of this would be like I think there was an actual experiment by like I think it was BF Skinner or something like that. I don't want to say that wrong, but essentially what they found out was that if you like give a dog a treat every time they shake paws or whatever, this is actually not as strong as if you were to do only occasionally doing a reward, right? So like they shake paws, and then only sometimes you give a reward, or you give it in an interval timing, or only a ratio way, right? Where like the strongest way to do something is to have a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, where you only sometimes give that reinforcement. And I think the strongest way to reinforce is through variable ratio, which is kind of like gambling is like the most common example for that, where gambling is pretty addictive. So like it's like a behavior that's reinforced kind of semi-randomly, right? Where like if you do something, sometimes you get a reward, right? Whereas like the other fixed interval, variable interval, or fixed ratio, these ones don't necessarily give you the most reinforcement or reward, right? So then I guess that actually leads us back to gaming a little bit as to why maybe gaming is so addictive sometimes, or competition is so addictive, is like you don't always win, right? And
Yeah.
your reward is winning, so it's only occasional, right? And so you're always seeking that next like win, but like sometimes avoiding a loss is more important than getting a win. It's kind of weird, right? Like when you're playing and when you're competing, you get into the scenarios where you don't always get your reward, but you end up getting reinforcing that behavior still, right?
Yeah. I
So
mean, people can still get, but like, even though they might not have lost, it doesn't mean they didn't get better.
that's true,
Just
right?
like in real life, I feel like just because you maybe didn't get that, like you use the example of getting into the college that you wanted to or the job that you wanted to, doesn't mean the work that you put in to go in there didn't make you better than yesterday in a sense. And I
Uh-oh,
think,
look at Mike. Mike is rationalizing already.
am I?
Mike is
Maybe.
rationalizing his losses already.
Uh,
Boo, boo this
uh,
man. Just
hey
kidding.
man, I'm just saying though, we did get better. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important too, and I'm sure we'll talk about that maybe at a later time about like um, growth and improvement in mindset, right?
And
Anyway,
so, I mean, we do have different types of leadership. I mean, I think we mentioned in our intro or episode 0 that, do you lead from the front? Are you the strategist in the back? Are you that emotional support person leader, right? Like there's a couple different ways you could lead, right?
that's true.
And some people lead by example, while some people talk it out with you, etc. Like in the review. Um, all of those are good, and sometimes you can learn a lot from others that lead differently from you, right? And you can always take that in to your way of leadership, I believe. Remember your strengths, but always it's not bad to understand, right?
Okay.
uh, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think those that ability to try to learn from others is something that goes into how far are you willing to go to improve, right? Sometimes we can just focus on our strength, right?
That's true.
But if you're willing to go further to improve like what your weaknesses are too and learning from others their talents, like I think you'll be pretty amazed by your results like eventually, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I agree. And so I guess that's another thing that we kind of wanted to talk about is like how far are you willing to improve, right? And that's kind of a segue into our next week's topic, right? Where we'll be talking about that next week, where we'll be talking about like I would like to refer to it as like motor and drive, maybe like being too competitive or not competitive enough, right? Overly competitive versus not competitive, right? So and then like understanding that and addressing that while in leadership roles, and then like how like our criticism, like the stuff that we've been talking about this week, could relate to our next week's topic, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you gotta have to sort of draw the line, right, where you say like, where are we at the point that we're good enough, right? Like, are we good? Are we satisfied personally with where we are, or can we like continue to improve? The answer is almost always going to be I can improve. So then the answer is like, the question then would be like, how far are we willing to go, right?
Yeah. And I guess to go back to uh, our solution to the cons of toxic reinforcement, right? Uh, remember, tough love, hug it out.
Tough
Thank you, John,
love, hug it
our
out.
cookie.
Yeah,
And remember, the point of it is to have an open discussion, give care, give love to your friends, give love to your teammates, etc., your family, your coworkers, right?
yeah,
And strive to be better together, right?
that's fair. I like that.
And along with all the different methods that we just discussed of supporting or discouraging certain behaviors, uh, that's how we want to approach toxic reinforcement and hopefully to lessen it
Yeah.
and create this better environment for the future for the next generation, our kids, whoever, right? Even ourselves, right? Or our parents if we really could. Um and yeah.
Yeah, and understanding, from that perspective, understanding that, positive reinforcement is really strong, right? And then like, what we've learned is like not we don't always have to do it, right? Like exactly from that whole reinforcement schedule thing that we just talked about, is that we don't always have to be out here encouraging people constantly, but when we do, it will reinforce whatever behavior it is that we talked about, right? Like that variable ratio one, right? Where it's like sometimes if we do, it'll be good, and then as long as we remind ourselves to make sure not to overly criticize, make sure not to, and on the other side, make sure to be accepting of criticism, right?
Yeah.
As long as we're able to do that, then we'll be good. We'll be better gamers in general.
Yeah. Better gamers, better athletes, better sports player, better people in general. And avoid the toxic reinforcement we mentioned, which is a do. Can you tell the audience? Remind them?
No, no, I can't.
Um, See, this is an example of him not giving things, But just to go back about what toxic reinforcement is, toxic reinforcement is when we're coming across rudely and kind of quick, trying to fix things, overly critical at the wrong times. Uh, like a real problem isn't going to be fixed quickly, to be honest, right?
True.
So avoid all of that and get your timing right, right? Make sure what the team goals are. Make sure your criticism is constructive, right? Just don't be like, "Yo, you suck" or something. Obviously,
Yeah,
that's not going to help anybody, to be
that literally
honest.
helps no one, right? So
Yeah, that's not going to help you. You're just going to tilt someone off the face of the earth, and their
full
performance
tilt.
goes to zero. That doesn't help, right? And don't forget some of that lighthearted humor, right? It'll be nice. It'll be nice for everybody. It'll make you laugh, maybe make them laugh. It'll keep everyone going.
Yeah, I like that.
And just to remind everybody, uh, please like, subscribe, and also comment. Because when you comment about something, we can look at your comments and try to figure out more content or different type of content we can say, or we can revisit this content later. Uh,
We
if we see a
want
lot of
you.
interest, right?
We want you to send us your constructive criticism. None of the toxic reinforcement shit. Only the
Your
positive.
internal.
Only the positive things. Only the positive. We try to keep it positive. But we will be accepting of any of these criticisms, right? So let us know how we're doing, what we're doing right or wrong, or like whatever you guys want to talk about the next time. Just throw it at us, right? Like we'll be there to receive.
And this is a little thing that I just wanted to do personally. That, as I mentioned in our episode 0, uh, I reached out to a certain artist who plays some ambient music that I always enjoy a lot, and I wanted us to kind of reflect for like, I don't know, like a minute to 3 minutes on things that we've talked about, you know, because after you obtain information, it's good to, while it's still there, to kind of put your own thoughts into it, right? Make it yours.
I like
Make
it.
your own thoughts
Yeah,
towards this.
sort of process it along the way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Process it, figure it out. Don't We have our opinions, right? We created them from our own reflections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to put out this music by Galliax.
Badass.
You can find it in the description in our video or our podcast. And yeah, so listen and hope you enjoyed our podcast and reflect on everything. We'll probably do it too.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. I'm reflecting
Yeah.
like mirrors. I'm reflecting like mirrors.
Oh God. But adieu, you got that music?
It's playing.